Alright, now before we discuss what happened in this episode, since we're going to be talking about multiverses, let's go ahead and get the obvious comparisons out of the way.
I just wish I got to see more of you.
Rick Sanchez of Earth Dimension C-137. You are under arrest for crimes against alternate Ricks by the authority of the Trans-Dimensional Council of Rick.
Now, some people might be wondering why I didn't include all of the Spider people in the Spider-Verse movies. Well, that's because that isn't all made up of just Peter Parker variants from across the multiverse. That's a whole bunch of different people. So different situation than what we're going to be talking about here. But before we get to that, let's talk about the actual setup for the episode. The episode starts out with Clark taking Lois and Jimmy to go see the spot in Kansas where his ship is pretty much buried and showing them the obelisks that come out of it. And then he starts giving basically a little bit of an interview to Lois about what he knows, which is slightly more than what he gave her last time, but still not really much of anything. And the whole reason why he's brought the two of them, specifically Lois here, is to actually ask her on a date.
I brought you here because there's no bad guys, no robots, and absolutely nothing to interrupt me when I ask you this. Lois Lane, will you go on a date with me?
And from there, we start out with Clark looking particularly crack-headed as he's sitting here trying to plan out this whole date with Lois. Because the thing is, he wants to take her on this date without any of like the Superman stuff kind of interfering and interrupting the date. He just wants to be able to focus on the two of them the entire time. But as it tends to go with most superhero things, that's not going to be how it works out. I have seen the sentiment expressed, though, that him doing this was him kind of showing that he doesn't like being Superman, that he doesn't want to do any of that stuff. But I don't really see how that's the case, because this is something that's been consistent for a lot of different superheroes, like Spider-Man, even the Flash. There's lots of different instances of heroes wanting to just have a normal date night without all of the like superhero stuff interfering with it, just for one time. I mean, it's not that they're against being a hero, but they just want to be able to have a one normal night, which I think is kind of understandable, and it's not exactly a new trope or anything. I do want to say, though, while I do understand what it is he's going for here, I would absolutely never want to go on a date like this. If you're the type of person who plans out dates like this, I don't know if I can help you. This is a little too involved. You know what I mean? Having specific times of saying, we're going to do this, and exactly this time we're going to leave and go do this, and then at this time we're going to leave and go. I understand if you have one thing that you kind of planned your day around, you know what I mean? Like if you're planning to go see a movie, obviously that's going to start at a specific time. So if you're kind of planning your day around that, but when you're kind of planning out how much time you're going to have exactly to eat, how long you're going to spend at each location, to me that's breaking it down a little bit too much. I like having just a general structure for my day, but I don't like planning it down to the minute. That's a bit too much. So agreeing with my sentiment, Jimmy is saying that he wants to go ahead and take off from there because Clark is clearly too involved in this whole thing. He's going to go over to Lois's, where he's assuming things are more normal, but as we can see, no, they are not. She is equally obsessive at the moment, but for a different reason. She's decided she's going to try and give Clark a gift, and the gift she wants to give to him is his past, because knowing that he has no real knowledge of his true ancestry or origin, she wants to try and get as many answers for him as she possibly can to just help him start putting the pieces together. And she's kind of applauding herself for doing all of this great work and being ready for the date, 10 minutes early, but then she realizes that she's not properly dressed. She forgot her dress at the dry cleaners, so they run out the gate so that way they can go and get that. And then we finally get to the part that I haven't been looking forward to at all, because we are finally introduced to this show's version of Mr. Mxyzptlk, and I had the exact same sentiment when I first saw this character design as Clark does when he first meets him.
Nope.
I'm sure it goes without saying, but in case it does need saying, I will go ahead and say it. This is not the way the character is supposed to look. Big surprise, right? I know. Really breaking the mold with what this show has been doing by giving us a design for a character who's technically a villain that's not true to the comic source. Although this one, This one, they decided to go way out into left field. And by into left field, I mean into Dragon Ball Z. And they pulled this character design out of it. Although, I have a theory about this character design that we'll get into later. It's not going to make much sense at the moment. But when the appropriate context is given, I will go ahead and theorize on just something. But we'll get into that in just a little bit. Mr. Mixius Pitalik, or I will go ahead and just start calling him Mixie because that's a lot easier than saying Mixius Pitalik every single time. As we saw, he showed up asking Clark for help, and Clark tells him no because he has, the date coming up, so he doesn't want to deal with anything having to do with the Superman thing. And when he first even tries to just deny even being Superman, that's when Mixie kind of reveals to him, I already know everything about you. And then he even shows us different versions of the character that we've seen, including the Fleischer Superman, the Super Friends Superman, the Bruce Timmverse Justice League Unlimited Superman, and then a special little Superman that's actually a little crab wearing the cape. And they did it kind of like the way that SpongeBob used to be back in the day, where they had a photorealistic crab that's just kind of moving in there before getting changed back to regular Clark. And of course, Clark is confused by this, but Mixie just explains to him, there is an infinite number of universes, ergo there are an infinite number of views out there. And he tells him, I'm actually here because I need your help because Lois is actually in danger. More particularly, your Lois is in danger. And then he shows us that she has been tied up because she's been captured. And this is the most sus thing I think I have ever seen from this. Yeah, the creators of the show should have known that this shot had the potential to spawn a whole bunch of video offshoots that they never intended. And then for some reason they have it just on the wall like it's some sort of framed print. And why am I focusing on it? Why were you looking at it? What is even going on here? But of course, this is enough to drive Clark to say that he will help whatever it takes. So of course, Mixie tells him, well, I know where we can go and save her, but I'm not able to just teleport us right in. You're going to have to get through their defense measures so that way we can actually go and save her. So he says, yeah, well, whatever it takes. So he does teleport them as close as he possibly can. Then as Lois and Jimmy are running back because they've secured the dress, all of a sudden they run into the alley and are confronted by a portal, out of which 3 individuals walk out, initially wearing helmets, but you can probably see where this is going.
Who are you people? Lois Lane? I'm Lois Lane. That's Lois Lane, and that's Lewis Lane.
What the femboy? Did she say Lewis?
And that's Lewis Lane.
Well, I'll be damned. I guess they're letting homosexuals in there now. And then we get a somewhat similar setup where she is informed by the older Lois that her Clark is in danger, so she needs to go with them. Going back over to Mixie and Clark, we see where they get to where they were headed, and we also see where Mixie is feeling very disoriented, very disheveled, because he's not feeling as powerful as he normally would. But then he directs Clark's attention to some doors that are in the way of them saving Lois, supposedly. Clark does buzz them open before being run over by a giant Roomba with legs. Jumping back over to the Legion of Side characters, we see where they are now on the ship of the Council of Lanes, or whatever it was they called themselves. And then Meemaw Lois ends up explaining to the younger Lois that this whole Council of Lois Lanes was first started by apparently the Fleischer era studios Lois Lane, who first discovered the multiverse. Because of course. And then this is also when we find out that apparently Olsens have been part of this whole Council of Lois Lanes. I guess they aren't important enough to be included into the name of the organization, but there is at least one here, Jelena Olsen.
Which Lois are you?
My name's Jelena Olsen, and unfortunately, it seems I'm you.
Many Olsens are also part of the League.
Meemaw goes on to explain that the reason why they abducted Lois was because they were tracking Mixie and they ended up losing track of him somewhere in their universe. And then when they came to this universe, they found out that not only was Mixie gone, but the Clark from this universe was also gone. So that's how they put together that he must be working with him, or at least for him, and they need her help to track him down, but not through the way that she's assuming. She thinks it's because she's an investigator, so they've come for her help, but instead, they need some of her DNA in order to try and track him. Once that's done, we get a little bit of setup for the intrigue where Meemaw goes and says that there's this one room that's pretty much off limits and tries to lock it down. And that, of course, catches Lois's attention before we go back over to Mixie and Clark, who are now in what appears to be a trophy room full of all kinds of artifacts from the comics. And then finally, the pretense is dropped when Mixie goes up to Clark, hands him a bag and says, all right, smash and grab whatever you can. And that's when Clark finally puts it together. He's like, wait, you're robbing this place? place?
No, of course not. We're robbing this place.
Of course, Clark isn't with it. He doesn't want any part of this, but then Mixie sees what he calls the good stuff before he knocks over the helm of Naboo that almost falls to the ground before Clark catches it. And when confronted about the truth about Lois's location, Mixie just drops the lie, is like, yeah, I don't know, I guess she's in Metropolis or something, before finding the object he appears to have been looking for the whole time, which looks like an old school tape recorder. And of course, when Superman presses the issue, that's when Mixie finally tells him, like, well, the reason why I needed your help was because this place, like he mentioned, is portal proof, so he couldn't just teleport in. He needed someone's help actually breaking into the place, and since Clark is so strong and invulnerable, he knew that he'd be able to help him get the job done. And then he mentioned something to Clark that he's never heard before.
But you're not the quickest guy from planet Krypton, are you?
What, Krypton? Is that where?
Then after smashing the display case of the tape recorder, Mixie starts making his way out, but of course Superman gets in his way and tells him that he's not going anywhere. He's going to turn him into whatever authorities will be taking him, and then he's going to go on his regular date with Lois, before Mixie reminds him, like, you're not a normal person. You're never going to be normal. I've seen so many different versions of you, and it always ends up the same way. And he starts telling Superman that he can't possibly stop him before he just flops to the ground, feeling his weakness again. But right when Superman is telling him, you're clearly not okay, he says, yeah, I'm not okay, but I have enough in me for one more trick, and then teleports them out again. Going back over to Lois and Jimmy, we see where Jimmy is talking about his next episode of the Flamebird thing, and then Jelena comes up to him telling him that out of all the other Olsens she's ever met, he's the only other one that's actually a Flamebird, so they start bonding over that. But while everyone's distracted, Lois sneaks into the Forbidden Room to go and see what information she can find out, which is basically about a bunch of different versions of herself, one of whom apparently has a costume that's just straight up the design of Sora from Kingdom Hearts. And the funny thing is, I'm not even into Kingdom Hearts like this, but when I was watching the episode, as soon as I saw it, I was like, whoa. But then she comes across a file that's marked Superman File X Redacted, and then when she asks what that means, the computer says that it can only be viewed at the headquarters, so of course she asks, well, where is the headquarters located? Before being distracted because she hears an announcement that everybody needs to meet downstairs, so of course she rushes out of the room and locks it so that way no one will know she was in there. And they finally have a lock on Superman and Mixie, who have teleported from Earth 1 to Earth 14, so they're getting ready to go and take him out, but then of course Lois is saying, like, wait a minute, why are y'all treating him like a villain? Like, you know Clark, you all know Clark. And we see Mixie and Superman show up in this desert environment where he's saying all they have to do now is wait for them to show up, and of course that's when a portal opens with the ship coming out of it. So when Lois and Jimmy see the rest of the team loading up these guns, they ask them, obviously, you know, what are those things for? Cyberpunk Lois says that they're the only way to take down a Kryptonian, and then when they ask for further clarification, Meemaw ends up explaining that they have to neutralize the Kryptonian because it's just too dangerous not to, and of course when Lois is saying she's not really down with that, Meemaw reveals that they knew she wouldn't be okay with it, and then she pushes her into basically a prison tube. So right when they come out, Mixie immediately shows up to start taunting them, but then rather than trying to do anything to stop him, you know, the person that they were actually tracking, they wait until Superman pops up trying to stop Mixie, and then they start shooting at him. Which also begs the question, if y'all were tracking Mixie and that's your main concern, what weapon did y'all have to try and stop him? Y'all came out with the kryptonite guns for Superman, but what gun was meant for Mixie? Then while Meemaw is busy celebrating the fact that they've neutralized Clark, they turn around to find out that Mixie has actually gotten on board their ship and teleports it away before anyone can get to the portal, including Clark. Then Meemaw gives orders to Femboy Lane to modify their bracelets to puncture space-time so that way they can try to get the ship back, and in the meantime she's going to guard Superman. Mixie is obviously feeling very proud of himself until young Lois comes up behind him, pointing one of the kryptonite guns at him, telling him to turn the ship around. And Mixie at first makes it seem like he's going to give up, but before that can happen, Lois overhears the computer saying that the master key is needed in order for coordinates to headquarters to be input. So when she asks him, do you know where the master key is, he says, no, I don't, but Lois Prime did, and she actually hid a copy of the master key in her tape recorder. So then Lois comes up with the idea to force Mixie to take her to the headquarters so that way she can find out whatever this hidden information about Superman is.
And now I know which Lois you are. You're the fun one!
And then we see where she does get to the headquarters and walks into this grand hall with these holograms of different Loises. And of course, on the left, we have the Fleischer era Lois Lane. And then off on the right, we actually have the Superman the Animated Series Lois Lane as well. Then we can see where there's Superwoman Lois Lane. And then there's Muslim Doctor Lois, I guess. As they keep walking down the hall, we get a close-up on a black Lois Lane. I'm not sure if that was a direct reference to that one issue where Lois turns herself black to see if Superman would still love her or not. But either way, there you go, Black Lois Lane. Then as they're walking, Lois actually asks Mixie what he knows about Superman, and he tells her, oh, a lot, but it'll be more fun to watch you find out on your own. And then we're seeing what I'm assuming is also a Sacagawea Lane, because obviously she must have been on expedition with Lewis and Clark. So walking in, Mixie's telling her that she has access to information from all across the multiverse right at her fingertips, and when she types in the File X thing, a little sphere comes up, and she looks at it and she's like, is this a file? Like, what do I do with this? And then we see where Mixie goes and starts looking for what he's here to find. And that is actually, in fact, his little derby hat that we would be expecting to see him wear. And as soon as he puts it on, it turns into like this crown type of thing. And this is kind of where I wanted to get into my theory, because as we saw, he did go and look for the little derby hat. And as soon as he put it on, it changed into the crown thing. The reason why I found that to be kind of interesting was because my working theory is that for this universe, things take on much more of like an anime type of appearance. That's why the hat changes from what we would normally expect it to look like to that more anime-ish design style. And this could be a good metatextual way of showing that all of the different concepts and characters as we know them from other iterations and even from the comics are still intact, but once they come into this particular universe, they take a slight change to fit the entire look and tone of this particular universe. So I don't know, all of that just to say I found that to be a nice touch. But anyway, with the hat, now Mixie is able to unlock his full powers. So with that, he opens a whole bunch of portals. And then when the League of Lanes show up, he gets into this massive shootout with them, while Superman flies up to Lois to make sure that she's okay and have a nice moment with her again.
This is my fault. I wanted to give you a normal first date without any Superman weirdness, but I ruined it before it even started.
No, I'm sorry. I've seen the files. I'm literally the worst Lois in the multiverse.
No.
You would be better off with anyone else.
Lois, you're the only Lois for me.
I'm annoying.
You're dedicated.
See, for all of the people who don't like the show specifically because of Lois, she agrees with you.
I love your brilliance.
I love your kindness.
I love...
But getting back to the fight, Lois says she has an idea, and then Superman flies out and starts confronting Mixie. He starts flying around the room, and then Mixie takes a moment to stand and gloat over Superman, but then Superman ends up revealing the fact that this has all been a trick before Lois reaches through the portal right behind him and pulls the hat off his head, so now he's not as powerful as he was anymore. The hat gets locked away, Mixie gets slapped in cuffs, and everything seems like it's going to be okay now. But then Meemaw discovers that Superman, Lois, and Jimmy are gone. Jelena covers for them by saying that the three of them grabbed one of the gauntlets, the little wrist things, and used it to teleport out, and because the computer is so fried, it can't find their place of origin anymore, because we found out earlier in the episode that apparently this universe was previously unknown, so they don't really know how to get back there anymore. And going over to the three, we see where they arrive back on their Earth right at 9:30 p.m., which if you will remember earlier in the episode was when Clark wanted them to go out for coffee. So immediately picking up on the cue, Jimmy slips out and basically gives Clark the go-ahead. And he attempts to go for it by starting to ask her if she'd want to go with him, saying that it's too late for dinner, but then...
I was thinking...
Treat me to coffee, Smallville?
Coming back home, Lois falls on her sofa and finds the orb that had the information from the File X, and when she's trying to figure out how it works, she manages to just tap a part of it that activates this hologram display showing her all these different versions of evil Superman, including one that looks like the evil Superman from the Justice League animated show. So all of this obviously horrifies Lois, but then Mixie shows up right behind her, which of course scares the shit out of her, because she was under the assumption that he was in jail, but then he tells her,
I was! It didn't take.
And then when she looks back at the hologram showing the evil Superman, she asks him if these images are a trick, but he says, oh no, this is the real thing. Just like as she found out earlier, not every Lois Lane from every universe wins a Pulitzer. She puts it together that not every Superman is good before the little orb opens and she pulls out a green rock that's very obviously kryptonite. She does ask him, what is this? But he tells her, oh no, I'm not going to tell you what it is. It'd be much more fun to just watch you find out. And with that, the episode ends. So overall, what did I think about the episode as a whole? I don't like the design from Mixus Pitalik at all. I do not like that design. I absolutely would prefer his classic design. If you're going to go with something updated, I mean, at the very, because they've done that before in like the Silver Age when they tried to put him in like this little orange jumpsuit or whatever. So I mean, if you're going to try and change the look, fine, but for one thing, you got to keep the little derby hat, and it has to stay looking like the derby hat. And then, you know, just try and make it, if you're not going to put him in like an old-timey type of suit, then try to make it look, you know, something like that, something along those lines. Suits aren't out of date. You can still put him in one, but whatever, that's what we ended up getting. And then the whole like multiverse thing with just different versions of it, I'm tired of that. That's the only reason I'm over multiverse stuff. I don't have a problem with like alternate universes where it's like the characters are radically different in some way. I grew up loving like what if stories and Elseworld stories, like stuff like that. I'm totally fine with. But this whole trope of like, oh, there's some sort of like group, some federation, some council of all these different variations of one particular character all working together, like all of that shit's just stupid. Y'all need to stop with that. Don't do any more of those stories. I'm so tired of these like councils of characters that it's just different variations of the same character. It's like, just stop. We don't need any more of those. We really don't. We never have. I get it, you know, that's something that's been done. Justice League, Justice Society, it's been done to death many times, but we don't need it anymore. Especially, like I said, for it to be based off of one character. At least with Justice League and Justice Society, those were whole teams of characters, not just one character making up an entire team. I'm over that. So overall, yeah, I didn't like those particular things. As far as Superman's actual story here, I'm still enjoying, you know, the little pieces that we're getting here, the setups for future conflicts. Now that Lois has this piece of kryptonite, what is she going to end up doing with it? How will he find out that she has it? What kind of problem will that end up causing? Only time will tell exactly how they're going to keep developing this, because there was at first the whole thing with the Kryptonian tech here on Earth, and then now we're going into like the multiverse, so now we have like different versions of evil Superman and that type of conflict between characters. So which one will come to fruition? I really hope they don't try and do all of them at the same time. Trying to bring all of that to fruition at the end of the first season, that would definitely be a misstep. If they do decide they want to try and put all of that together at the end of the first season, well, it's going to be pretty interesting to see how that plays out, I guess. So yeah, I think that's about all that I can say on this particular episode. I've put all of my thoughts out there now that we did the recap and the breakdown and all of that fun stuff. So I would like to know, what are your thoughts on the episode? Feel free to let me know what you think about it if you're still watching. I know I have some people who weren't watching it to begin with or have given up on watching it. That's totally fine. If you're watching my videos to know what's going on with it, I'm not going to be mad at you. I wouldn't be mad at you either way. But I'm much more appreciative that you decide to just watch my videos rather than watching the show. Totally fine with that. Feel free to keep doing that. Anyway, yeah, let me know what you think about anything that I've talked about here down below in the comments section. Like the video if you did like it. If you didn't, there is a button for you as well. We cater to all demographics here. But if you're done here, I would appreciate it if you would go and read a book. But if not, well then I'll see you on my next video.